Now, I want to give you some insights from the life of Joseph. But in doing it, I want to begin by sharing with you a children's book, children's story that some of you probably remember reading as a child or reading to your children. It was written in 1972, and it was Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. Do any of you remember that? Okay. Some of you who are older don't remember that. So I want to tell you a little about his book, okay, or the story of Alexander. It's actually based on a true life happening. The mother who wrote it had 3 sons who maybe like Family Circus or something like that. It was all real. And so then she writes the story. There was Anthony, Nick, and Alexander. The story actually centers around Alexander. And it begins with him going to bed with gum in his mouth. Yes, you guessed it. He woke up with gum in his hair. He gets up and goes to dress and trips over his skateboard. He gets into the sink and drops a sweater in the sink. And he knows that it's going to be a terrible, horrible, no good, really bad day. They go downstairs for breakfast, and in his brother's boxes are trinkets. When he pours out the cereal, his is empty other than for cereal. And he knows it's a terrible, horrible, no good, really bad day. They get in the car to go to school, and he's forced to sit in the middle. He doesn't have a window to roll down. And then when he gets to school, he gets in the classroom, and the teacher's asking them for their work. He finds that the teacher likes Paul's picture of a sailboat better than his picture of an invisible castle. And then when he sings, she tells him he sings too loud. And when he counts, he leaves out the number 16, and he says, who needs 16 anyway? And he knows it's a terrible, horrible, no good, really bad day. And then he goes to lunch, and his friends Phil and Albert and Paul are all there, and they eat their lunch, and then when they get ready to get their dessert, they all have desserts. And his mother has forgotten his. And if that's not bad enough, then Paul, that great friend of his, suddenly tells him, you're no longer my best friend. You're my 3rd best friend. And he has a terrible, horrible, no good, really bad day. His mother picks him up, takes him to school. They're going to, goes to the dentist. They're going to have a dentist appointment to have their teeth checked. And 2 brothers come out with a clean check, and they discover he has cavities. And he knows it's a terrible, horrible, no good, really bad day. Following the visit to the dentist, they get in the car, they go to Dad's office, and Dad visits with them, and they all get a little bit of candy, and getting back on the elevator, he gets his foot caught in the door. And so that hurts, and he cries and gets off, and Mom tells him to stand and wait, and she goes and gets the car, and while she's coming with the car, he is shoved and falls down in the mud, and when Mom gets there, he gets in trouble for getting in the mud. And he knows it's a terrible, horrible, no good, really bad day. They finally make it at home, and Mom serves a meal, and what she serves is beans, and she has lima beans, and he hates lima beans. And then they sit down to watch TV, and he sees kissing on TV, and he hates kissing. And then he has to take a bath, and the bath is too hot. And when they pull the plug, his favorite marble goes down the drain. And then his mother makes him put on his train pajamas, the pajamas he hates. And he said, it's a terrible, horrible, no good, really bad day. I'm just going to move to Australia. And his mother says, in Australia, they also have terrible, horrible, no good, really bad days. Well, we kind of laugh about Alexander and what he went through and what took place, the gum in the hair, the 3rd best friend, the going to the dentist, the wearing of the PJs, and we say, wow, Not too bad. Our life can be filled with worse things than that. Maybe something like when we gathered together at our home, it was time for all of our children to be at our place for Christmas this year, and Tim and Jana had just gotten there and the phone rings, and as happens with clergy so often, they're notified of a death. But this one was, while all deaths are bad, it was more tragic than others. A 30-year-old father, father of 2 children and a lovely wife, had taken his life the day before Christmas. Pretty horrible, terrible, no good, really bad day. Or like when I pastored in Enid, I had a gentleman call me one day, and he'd gotten home from work, and it was early evening, and he said, "You know where my wife is?" I said, "No." "What's wrong?" He says, "Well, I came home from work, and all of her possessions are missing from the house." She had decided to call it quit while he was at work. She loaded up everything and left. And he didn't know where she was. And that's a horrible, terrible, no good, really bad day. Or you go to cash your check that you received from work and discover that your boss has gone bankrupt and that check is no longer good and you've already written checks. And it's a horrible, terrible, no good, really bad day. Or even as Pastor Dan and Deb, though they knew her mother had been battling with illness, suddenly they get that phone call. And they make the rush and they're within 10 minutes of being home when she passes away. They're quite broken. The terrible, horrible, no good, really bad day. Well, that's only a sample of the things that probably you're going through. Wouldn't it be nice if it was only the train PJs? Or the marble down the drain? Or the gum and hair? But the reality of life is that we face some pretty horrible, terrible, no good, really bad days. Tough times. And in particular in the economy we are in, maybe even tougher than we had thought. Those of you who maybe are retired said, "Oh, I have this much to live on," and suddenly it went, boop. I have this much to live on. Or as one retired minister was on our district a few years ago and has now gone on to heaven. He and his wife retired and moved where their children were, and retired ministers don't have a lot, but they try to save enough to at least get by, as most of you do. And their son-in-law and daughter needed a loan, and they made a loan to them, which put them in risk, with the intent of it coming back very quickly, and then that son-in-law and daughter lost everything. And now the retired father, who is 75, finds himself hunting for a job just to make sure they can put enough food on their own table. You see, we definitely have these tough times, but they're not new. They're not new at all. In fact, we're told in the Scripture there's nothing new on the earth. And you look at the life of Joseph, a young man, the 11th son of 12, in a large family, the kind of a favorite son of Dad. That can happen sometimes. And so he's given a place of honor. You can say maybe in the family business he was made the sudden chief operating officer. Dad had kind of tapped him to run the show.